Brian Cashman just said something about Aaron Judge that nobody in the Yankees organization was supposed to say out loud. On July 17, 2026, the Yankees general manager walked into what was supposed to be a routine media availability and dropped a revelation so shocking, so unexpected, so completely contrary to everything the organization has been saying publicly for months that the entire baseball world stopped and stared. This is not a minor update about injury timelines or roster decisions. This is Brian Cashman fundamentally changing how we understand Aaron Judge's situation, the Yankees' championship window, and the future of the most famous franchise in American sports. Whatever you thought you knew about where this is heading, throw it out. Because Cashman just changed everything. Subscribe right now and hit the notification bell, because this Yankees story is moving fast, and I am covering every development the second it breaks. You do not want to miss what comes next. Let's get into it. Let me set the scene for you, because context makes this revelation hit so much harder. Brian Cashman has been the general manager of the New York Yankees since 1998. 28 years running the most scrutinized front office in professional sports. In that time, he has won multiple World Series, navigated ownership changes, managed superstars and their enormous egos, survived media environments that would destroy most executives, and developed a reputation for being one of the most carefully controlled communicators in baseball. When Brian Cashman says something surprising, it is surprising precisely because he almost never does. He is disciplined, methodical, and almost robotically careful with his public words. Which is exactly why what happened on July 17, 2026 is so significant. Because Brian Cashman was not careful. For the first time in perhaps a decade of press conference appearances, Cashman said something that felt genuinely unscripted, genuinely personal, and genuinely revealing about a situation the Yankees have been managing with extreme tightness. Here is what happened. Cashman was conducting a media availability that was scheduled to focus on trade deadline positioning, standard stuff about the Yankees' needs, the market conditions, the kind of player additions that might be in play before the deadline. The first 15 minutes were exactly that. Reporters asked about pitching depth. Cashman gave careful non-answers. Someone asked about the bullpen situation. Cashman gave measured responses. Everything was proceeding exactly as anticipated. Then a reporter from the New York Post asked a question that seemed straightforward on the surface. What is the most recent update on Aaron Judge's arm fatigue situation and his recovery timeline? It is the question every reporter in that room has been asking for weeks, and getting the same vague answer from. Most people expected another diplomatic non-response. Instead, Cashman paused. A long pause, the kind that experienced reporters recognize as something meaningful happening in real time. And then he said something that made the room go completely still. He said, "I am going to be honest with you in a way I probably should have been honest a while ago. Aaron's situation is more complex than what we have communicated publicly. The Cascade injuries he has experienced have created a recovery picture that is genuinely uncertain in ways that are difficult for us to sit with as an organization. I do not know when he is coming back. I do not know if he will be the same player when he does. And I think our fans deserve to hear that from me directly rather than continuing to receive optimistic updates that may not be fully reflecting the reality of what our medical team is telling us." The room went absolutely silent. Reporters were typing furiously. Some were instinctively reaching for their phones to post in real time. The PR staff in the back of the room was visibly uncomfortable. And Cashman, having apparently decided that this was the moment for honesty, kept going. He said the medical team's most recent evaluation of Judge's Cascade injuries, the secondary issues in his lower back, opposite hip, and quadriceps that developed as compensation patterns from protecting the original surgically repaired hip flexor, has produced a timeline assessment that the Yankees have not shared publicly. According to Cashman's revelation, That internal medical assessment puts Judge's return to full baseball activities not in August as previously suggested, not in September as the backup timeline implied, but potentially not until October. Which would mean, and Cashman said this explicitly, that Aaron Judge's 2026 regular season is likely over. He said, "Likely over." Those two words, coming from Brian Cashman in a public media availability about the Yankees' most important player on July 17, 2026, they represent one of the most significant and shocking statements a Yankees executive has made in years. Now let me break down exactly what this revelation means for the Yankees organization and their future, because there are multiple layers here and each one matters. The immediate competitive impact is severe and has to be acknowledged honestly. The Yankees are currently sitting at 48-43, 3 games behind the Baltimore Orioles in the AL East, fighting for a wild card position with the Red Sox and Blue Jays both within striking distance. They have been playing competitive baseball without Judge for months now, which is genuinely impressive and speaks to the quality of the supporting cast Cashman has assembled. But there is a difference between playing competitive baseball when you believe your best player is coming back next month and playing competitive baseball knowing he is probably done for the year. The psychological impact of Cashman's revelation on the clubhouse will need to be carefully managed. Players have been motivated in part by the knowledge that Judge was coming back, that the team they were fighting to keep in playoff position would be significantly stronger when their captain returned. If that motivation driver is removed, the mental approach to the remaining games has to shift. The Yankees are no longer fighting to set the table for Judge's return. They are fighting to make the playoffs without him, which is a completely different challenge requiring a completely different mindset. Garrett Cole, the ace who has been shouldering enormous responsibility this season, was asked about Cashman's revelation in a brief interview following the media availability. Cole said, "Brian is honest, and that is what good leaders do. We have always known we had to handle this without Aaron for however long it took. That timeline does not change who we are. We still believe in this group." That response from the team's most important pitcher reflects the right mindset, but also reveals the work that needs to be done to maintain belief after news this significant. The trade deadline implications of Cashman's revelation are enormous, and will define the immediate future of the organization. Before today, the Yankees were universally viewed as buyers at the deadline, a team adding pieces to complement a roster that would soon have its best player returning. That framework justified significant investment in deadline acquisitions, because the player adding pieces would be adding them to a playoff-caliber team with Aaron Judge in the middle of the lineup. After today, that framework is completely upended. If Judge is not returning in 2026, the calculus changes dramatically. Do you spend significant prospects and payroll flexibility to acquire players who help you make a wild card appearance without Judge? Or do you become sellers, or at minimum stand-patters, accepting that 2026 without Judge is not a realistic championship window, and preserving your resources for a 2027 run with a healthy Judge? Cashman's revelation did not answer that question explicitly, but it changes every conversation the Yankees are having with other teams. General managers around baseball, who were previously reluctant to help a Judge-led Yankees team become playoff dangerous, are now looking at the situation differently. A Judge-less Yankees playoff team is a much less threatening entity than a team with a 2-time MVP in the middle of the lineup. Let us talk about what this revelation means for Judge himself, because he is a human being in an extremely difficult personal situation, and Cashman's honesty, while organizationally appropriate, creates a new set of pressures for the player at the center of this story. Aaron Judge signed a massive long-term contract extension with the Yankees because he wanted to spend his prime years in New York, pursuing championships with the franchise he loves. The 2026 season was supposed to be a significant year in that championship pursuit. Instead, he has spent the majority of it in the training room, dealing with an injury cascade that has been more stubborn and complex than anyone anticipated. How does a player of Judge's stature and pride process hearing his general manager say publicly that his season is likely over? Sources close to Judge describe him as devastated but determined, deeply disappointed by the injury situation, but channeling that disappointment into his rehabilitation work with renewed intensity. Judge apparently watched Cashman's press conference in real time from the training facility, and his reaction was described as stoic but visibly emotional. He posted on social media within an hour of Cashman's revelation. "Heard what Brian said today. He is being straight with all of you, and I respect that. My goal has not changed. Getting healthy the right way. Being the best teammate I can be every day I am here. And coming back stronger than before." To Yankees fans, this is not the end of anything. It is just a detour. We will get where we are going. That statement, characteristically measured and captain-like, reflects why Judge has earned such deep loyalty from his teammates and fanbase regardless of what is happening medically. The long-term picture for the Yankees is actually more complicated than the immediate 2026 crisis, and Cashman's revelation opens up questions that will define the franchise's direction for years. Judge is 34 years old. The hip flexor surgery and the Cascade complications that followed it represent a significant physical event for a player his size. Large athletes, and Judge at 6 feet 7 inches and 282 pounds qualifies as exceptionally large even by baseball standards, can sometimes recover from major lower body injuries and return to elite production. But the history of players his size dealing with hip-related surgeries is not uniformly encouraging. The question that Yankees scouts, analysts, and medical staff are quietly wrestling with, and that Cashman's revelation implicitly raised by saying, "I do not know if he will be the same player when he does return," is what version of Aaron Judge comes back in 2027. If it is the two-time MVP, who is arguably the best hitter in baseball over the past several seasons, the Yankees' championship window is simply delayed by 1 year. If it is a diminished version, less explosive at the plate, slower in the field, limited by the physical consequences of this injury chain, the organizational playing calculus changes significantly. Cashman was careful not to suggest the worst-case scenario is likely. His "I do not know" framing was honest uncertainty rather than pessimistic prediction. The medical staff apparently believes Judge can and will return to elite performance. They just cannot give a reliable timeline because the Cascade injuries have proven unpredictable in their resolution speed. Now let us examine how the rest of the AL East and American League is responding to Cashman's revelation, because the competitive landscape just shifted in ways that matter to multiple franchises. The Baltimore Orioles, sitting 3 games ahead of New York and dealing with their own roster management challenges, apparently had an internal celebration when Cashman's words spread through the league. Sources describe Orioles front office members as relieved by the confirmation that Judge is not coming back. Their most pressing concern all season has been what happens when New York gets their captain back. That concern is now effectively off the table for 2026. The Boston Red Sox and Toronto Blue Jays, both chasing the same wild card spots as New York, are recalibrating their own trade deadline strategies in response to the Yankees' changed situation. If New York becomes less aggressive buyers at the deadline or potentially becomes a seller, it creates opportunities for both teams to improve without competing against the Yankees' financial and prospect resources. The broader American League playoff picture opens up considerably if the Yankees are operating in a diminished capacity for the remainder of the season. Teams in the AL West and AL Central that were looking at New York as a potential opponent to avoid in October are now reconsidering the bracket implications of a judge-less Yankees team versus one with their two-time MVP. Let us also address the financial dimension of this situation, because it matters more than people sometimes acknowledge in these conversations. Judge's contract is enormous and long-term. He is committed to the Yankees for years beyond 2026. A season lost to injury does not change that financial reality. The Yankees will pay Judge whether he plays 30 games or 0 games in 2026, and that financial commitment continuing into years when his return to elite production is uncertain creates real complexity for payroll planning. Cashman has historically been creative and aggressive in managing the Yankees' payroll, but even by his standards, navigating the Judge situation going forward will require careful thinking. You have to maintain roster quality around Judge to have a championship window when he returns, which requires spending. But you are also spending on Judge himself regardless of production, which limits flexibility. The financial tightrope the Yankees walk over the next 12 months will be one of the most interesting front office challenges in baseball. One final dimension worth examining: Cashman's decision to be honest today rather than continuing with optimistic messaging. That decision itself tells you something important about where the Yankees organization is right now. Organizations that are truly confident in their path do not typically volunteer bad news proactively. The fact that Cashman felt the need to come clean, to use his words, to be honest in a way I should have been honest a while ago, suggests that the continued gap between public messaging and internal reality had become uncomfortable and unsustainable. That kind of organizational honesty, while painful in the short term, is ultimately what builds lasting credibility with fans and media. Yankees fans who felt misled by months of optimistic updates will likely respond to Cashman's revelation with frustration at the timeline, but respect for the honesty. That respect matters. Trust between a franchise and its fanbase is not infinite, and has to be maintained through exactly this kind of transparency when the news is hard. Brian Cashman's shocking Aaron Judge revelation on July 17, 2026 changes the Yankees' future in ways that extend far beyond the remaining months of this season. It changes the trade deadline strategy, the competitive expectations for 2026, the organizational planning for 2027, and the entire framework through which fans and media understand where this franchise is headed. Judge is likely done for 2026. The Yankees are fighting for a playoff spot without their captain. And the future depends on what version of Aaron Judge returns when he finally does. As of today, those are the honest facts that Cashman finally told everyone. Warning: entertainment disclaimer. This content is based on reported sources and publicly available information as of July 17, 2026. All analysis represents opinion and commentary for entertainment purposes only. No affiliation with MLB, the New York Yankees, or any individuals mentioned. For official team information, visit Yankees.com.